What's up, guys? Nikki here. Welcome back to Nerdosity. If you guys happen to like this type of content, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button and turn on that bell notification for more content just like this one. We also do reaction videos, and it's pretty awesome. Um, but anyway, in today's video, we are reading chapter 4? Chapter 4? Question mark? Yeah, chapter 4. Yep, chapter 4. Of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, but if you are located anywhere else in the world, it is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Why it is like that, I don't know, because Americans are stupid, I guess. We are not of the smart. Anyway, The Keeper of the Keys, chapter 4 is what we're reading. This is what the picture looks like. Big old Hagrid right there, Keeper of the Keys. Keeper of the Keys. So, without further ado, let's get into it. But before we do, as always, I am dyslexic with a speech impediment, so please don't hold that against me. Words will be said wrong and read wrong. I'm doing my best here, people. I promise, I swear I am. Okay. Chapter 4. The Keeper of the Keys. Boom! They knocked again. Dudley jerked awake. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind them, and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hands. Now they knew what had been in the long, thin package he had bought with them. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed." There was a pause. Then, smash! The door was hit with such a force that it swung clean off its hinges, and with a deafening crash landed on the floor. A giant of a man standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long shaggy mane of hair and a wild tangled beard, but you could make out his eyes, glinting like black beetles under all the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head just brushed the ceiling. He bent down, picked up the door, and fitted it as easily back into its frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned to look at them all. "Couldn't make us a cup of tea, could you? It's not been an easy journey." He strode over to the sofa where Dudley sat frozen with fear. "Budget up, you great lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouching terrified behind Uncle Vernon. "Ah, here's Harry," said the giant. Harry looked up into the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw that the beetle eyes were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," said the giant. "Ye look like your dad, but ye've got your mom's eyes." Uncle Vernon made a raspy noise. "I demand that you leave at once, sir," he said. "You are breaking and entering." "Ah, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hands, bent it into a knot as easily as it had been made out of rubber, and threw it into the corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made another funny noise, like a mouse being trodden on. "Anyway, Harry," said the giant, turning his back on the Dursleys, "a very happy birthday to you. Got something for you here. I might have sat on it at some point, but it tastes all right." From the inside pocket of his black overcoat, he pulled a slightly squished box. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on it in green icing. Harry looked at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost on his way to the mouth, and what he said instead was, "Who are you?" The giant chuckled. "True, I haven't introduced myself. Rubeus Hagrid, Keeper of the Keys and Grounds at Hogwarts." He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about that tea, then, eh?" he said, rubbing his hands together. "I'd say not ter summat strong, if ye've got it, mind." His eyes fell on the empty grate with a shriveled chip bag in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but then he drew back a second later. There was a roaring fire there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as though he'd sunk into a hot bath. The giant sat back down on the sofa which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of his pockets and his coat. A copper kettle, a squishy package of sausages, a poker, a teapot, several chipped mugs, and a bottle of some sort of ambered liquor that he took a swig from before starting to make tea. Soon the hut was filled with sounds and smells of sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but he slid the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages from the poker. Dudley fidgeted a little. Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant chuckled darkly. "Your great big puddin' of a son don't need fattening no more, Dursley. Don't worry." He passed the sausages to Harry, who was as hungry as he had never tasted anything so wonderful, but he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Suddenly, finally, as nobody seemed about to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't really know who you are." The giant took a gulp of tea and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everyone does. And like I told you, I'm keeper of the keys at Hogwarts. Yeah, you'll know all about Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry?" Harry said quickly. "Sorry?" barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. "It's them as should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought ye wouldn't even know about Hogwarts, for crying out loud. Did you ever wonder where your parents learned it all?" "All what?" asked Harry. "All what?" Hagrid thundered. "Now wait just 1 second." He had leapt to his feet. In his anger he seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. "Do you mean to tell me," he growled at the Dursleys, "that this boy knows nothing about anything?" Harry thought that he was going a bit far. He had been to school, after all, and his marks weren't bad. "I know some things," he said. "I can, do math and stuff." But Hagrid simply waved his hand. "About our world, I mean. Your world, my world, your parents' world." "What world?" Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. "Dursley!" he boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like Mibblewimble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. "But you must have known about your mom and dad. I mean, they're famous. You're famous." "What? My mom and dad weren't famous, were they?" You don't know. Hagrid ran his finger through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. "You don't know what ye are," he said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. "Stop," he commanded. "Stop right there, sir. I forbid you from telling the boy anything." A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look that Hagrid gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his very syllables trembled with rage. You never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him. I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley, and now you've kept it from him all these years." "Kept what from me?" said Harry eagerly. "Stop! I forbid you!" yelled Uncle Vernon in a panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. "Ah, go boil your heads, both of you," said Hagrid. "Harry, you're a wizard." There was silence inside the hut. Only the sea and the whistle wind could be heard. "I'm a what?" gasped Harry. "A wizard, of course," said Hagrid, sitting back down on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower. "And a thumping good un, I'd say, once you've been trained up a bit. With a mom and dad like yours, what else would you be? And I reckon it'd be about time you read your letter." Harry stretched out his hand at last to take a yellowish envelope addressed in emerald green to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hot on the rock, the sea. He pulled the letter and read, "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Source, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confed of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please enclose the list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress." I had an itchy nose. Questions exploded inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered, "What does it mean? They await my owl." "Golloping Gorgons. That reminds me," said Hagrid, clapping a hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse, and from another pocket inside his overcoat he pulled an owl, a real, live, rather ruffled-looking owl, a long quill, and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note that Harry could read upside down. Dear Professor Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. Hope you're well, Hagrid. Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which clamped it in its beak, went to the door, and threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back and sat down as though this was normal as talking on the telephone. Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly. Where was I? Said Hagrid, but at that moment Uncle Vernon, still ashen but looking very angry, moved into the firelight. He's not going, he said. Hagrid grunted. I'd like to see a great muggle like you stop him, he said. A what? Said Harry, interested. A muggle, said Harry. Hagrid, said Hagrid. It's what we call non-magic folk, like them, and it's your bad luck you grew up with a family of the biggest muggles I ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took him in we'd put a stop to that rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. We swore we'd stamp him out. Wizard indeed. You knew? Said Harry. You knew I'm a wizard? Knew? Shrieked Aunt Petunia. Knew. Of course we knew. How could you not be? My dreaded sister being what she was. Oh, she got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school and came home every vacation with her pockets full of frog spawns, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was, a freak. But for my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were proud having a witch in the family. She stopped to draw a breath and then went ranting on. It seemed as if she had been wanting to say this for years. Then she met that Potter at school, and they left and got married and had you. And of course I knew you'd be just the same, just as strange, just as abnormal as then. If you please, she went and got herself blown up, and we got landed with you. Harry had gone very white. As soon as he found his voice, he said, Blown up? You told me they died in a car crash. Car crash? Roared Hagrid, jumping up so angrily that the Dursleys scuttled back into their corner. How could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? It's an outrage, a scandal. Harry did not know his own story when every kid in the world knows his name. But why? What happened? Harry said urgently. The anger faded from Hagrid's face. He looked suddenly anxious. I never expected this, he said in a low, worried voice. I had no idea when Dumbledore told me that there might be trouble getting hold of you, but how much you didn't know. Ah, Harry, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but someone's gotta. You can't get off to Hogwarts not knowing. He threw a dirty look at the Dursleys. Well, it's best you know as much as I can tell you. Mind, I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery part of it. He sat down, staring into the fire for a second, and then said, It begins, I suppose, with a person called, but it's incredible. You don't know his name. Everyone in our world knows. Who? Well, I don't like saying the name if I can help it. No one does. Why not? Golloping gargoyles, Harry. People are scared. Blimey, this is difficult. See, if there was this wizard who went bad, as bad as you could go, worse than worse. His name was... Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. Could you write it down? Harry suggested. Nah, can't spell it. All right, Voldemort. Hagrid shuddered. Don't make me say it again. Anyway, this wizard, about 20 years ago now, started looking for followers. Got him too. Some were afraid, some just wanted a bit of his power because he was getting himself power, all right. Dark days, Harry. Didn't know who to trust, didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards or witches. Terrible things happened. He was taken over. Of course, some stood up to him, and he killed them. Horrible. One of the only safe places left was Hogwarts. Reckon Dumbledore's the only one you know who was afraid of. Didn't dare try taking the school. Not just then, anyway. Now, your mom and dad were a good old witch and wizard, if I ever knew. Head boy and girl at Hogwarts in their days. Suppose the mystery is why you-know-who never tried to get him on his side before. Probably because they knew they were too close to Dumbledore to want anything to do with the dark side. Maybe he thought he could persuade him. Maybe he just wanted him out of the way. All anyone knows is he turned up the village where you was all living on Hogwarts on Halloween 10 years ago. You were just a year old. He came to your house and Hagrid suddenly pulled out a very dirty spotted handkerchief and blew his nose with a sound of like a foghorn. Sorry, he said, but it's that sad. Knew your mom, your dad, and nice people. Knew your mom and dad and nicer people you couldn't find. Anyway, you know who killed him, and this is the real mystery of things. He tried to kill you too, wanting to make a clean job of it, I suppose, or maybe he just liked killing by then, but he couldn't do it. Never wonder how you got that mark on your forehead? That's no ordinary cut. That's what you get when a powerful evil curse touches you. Took care of your mom and your dad and your house even, but didn't work on you, and that's why you're famous, Harry. No one ever lived after he decided to kill him. No one except you, and he killed some of the best witches and wizards of the age. The McNaughtons, the Bones, the Preetwets, and you was only a baby and you lived. Something very powerful was going on in Harry's mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, he saw the blinding flash of green light more clearly than he had ever remembered it before, and he remembered something else. For the first time in his life, a high, cold, cruel laugh. Hagrid was watching him sadly. Took you from your ruined house on Dumbledore's orders, brought you to this lot. Loads of old tosh, said Uncle Vernon. Harry jumped. He had forgotten that the Dursleys were there. Uncle Vernon certainly seemed to have gotten back his courage. He was glaring at Hagrid and his fists were clenched. Now you listen here, boy, he snarled. I accept there's something strange about you. Probably nothing good. Beating wouldn't have cured. And for all of this about your parents, well, they were weirdos, no denying it. And the world's better off without them, in my opinion. Asked for what they got, getting mixed up with these wizard types. Just what I expected. Always knew they'd come to a sticky end. At that moment, Hagrid leapt off the sofa and drew a battered pink umbrella from inside his coat. Pointing it at Uncle Vernon like a sword, he said, I'm warning you, Dursley. I'm warning you. One more word, and the danger of being speared on the end of an umbrella by a bearded giant. Uncle Vernon's courage failed again. He flattened himself against the wall and fell silent. That's better, said Hagrid, breathing heavily and sitting back down on the sofa, which this time sagged right to the floor. Harry, meanwhile, still had questions to ask, hundreds of them. But what happened to you know who? Good question, Harry. Disappeared, vanished, same night he tried to kill you. Makes you even more famous. That's the biggest mystery, see? He was getting more and more powerful. Why'd he go? Some said he died. Codswalloped, in my opinion. Don't know if he had enough human left in him to die. Some say he's still out there biding his time, but I don't believe it. People who was on his side came back to ours. Some of them came out of trances. Don't reckon they could have done it if he was coming back. Most of us reckon he's still out there somewhere, but lost his powers. Too weak to carry on, 'cause something about you finished him, Harry. There was something going on that night he hadn't counted on. I don't know what it was, no one does, but something about you stumped him, all right. Hagrid looked at Harry with a warmth and respect blazing in his eyes, but Harry, instead of feeling pleased and proud, felt quite sure there had been a horrible mistake. A wizard? Him? How could he possibly be? He spent his life being clouted by Dudley, and bullied by Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. If he was really a wizard, why hadn't he been turned into a warty toad every time they tried to lock him in his cupboard? If he'd once defeated the greatest sorcerer in the world, how come Dudley had always been able to kick him around like a football? Hagrid, he said quietly, I think you must have made a mistake. I don't think I can be a wizard. To his surprise, Hagrid chuckled. Not a wizard, eh? Never made things happen when you was scared or angry? Harry looked into the fire. Now that he came to think about it, very odd things had ever made his aunt and uncle furious with him happened when he, Harry, had been upset or angry, caused by Dudley's gang, or he had somehow found himself out of their reach. Dreading going to school with a ridiculous haircut, he'd managed to make it grow back, and the very last time Dudley had hit him, hadn't he gotten his revenge without even realizing was doing it? Hadn't he set a boa constrictor on him? Harry looked at Hagrid, smiling, and saw Hagrid was positively beaming at him. "See?" said Hagrid. "Harry Potter, not a wizard. You wait. You'll be right famous at Hogwarts." But Uncle Vernon wasn't going to give up without a fight. "Haven't I told you he's not going?" he hissed. "He's going to Stonewall High, and he'll be grateful for it. I've read those letters, and he needs all sorts of rubbish spell books and wands, and if he wants to go, a great muggle like you won't stop him," growled Hagrid. "Stop Lily and James Potter's son going to Hogwarts? You're mad. His name been down ever since he was born. He's off to the finest school of witchcraft and wizardry in the world. 7 years there, and he won't know himself. He'll be with youngsters of his own sort for a change, and he'll be under the greatest headmaster Hogwarts ever had, Albus Dumbledore. I am not paying for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks," yelled Uncle Vernon, but he had finally gone too far. Hagrid seized his umbrella and whirled it over his head. "Never," he thundered, "insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me." He brought the umbrella swishing down through the air to point at Dudley. There was a flash of violet light, a sound like a firecracker, a sharp squeal, and the next second Dudley was dancing on the spot with his hands clapped at his fat bottom, howling in pain. When he turned his back on them, Harry saw a curly pig's tail poking through a hole in his trousers. Uncle Vernon roared, pulling Aunt Petunia and Dudley into the other room. He cast one last terrifying look at Hagrid and slammed the door behind him. Hagrid looked down at his umbrella and stroked his beard. "Shouldn't have lost my temper," he said ruefully. "But it didn't work anyway. Meant to turn him into a pig, but I suppose he was so much like a pig anyway, there wasn't much left to do." He gave a sideways look to Harry under his bushy brow. "Be grateful if you didn't mention this to anyone at Hogwarts," he said. "I'm not supposed to do magic, strictly speaking. I was allowed to do it a bit for ya and get your letter to you and stuff. One of the reasons I was so keen on taking the job." "Why aren't you supposed to do magic?" asked Harry. "Oh, well, I was at Hogwarts myself, but I got expelled. To tell you the truth, in me 3rd year, they snapped me wand in half and everything. But Dumbledore let me stay on as a gamekeeper. Great man, Dumbledore." "Why were you expelled?" "It's getting late. We've got lots to do tomorrow," said Hagrid loudly. Gotta get up to town and get your books and that." He took off his thick black coat and threw it to Harry. "You can nip under that," he said. "Don't mind if it wiggles a bit. I think I still got a couple dormice in one of the pockets." And that is chapter 4, everybody. As always, I like to give my little bit of review on the chapter, kind of compare it compare the book with the movie. In the movie, his umbrella is definitely not pink. I don't know why it was pink in the book for a man like Hagrid. I can't see a man like Hagrid owning a pink umbrella, like, at all. I don't remember Hagrid telling Harry the story about what happened to James and Lily in this part. Of course, it's been a while since I've seen the movie. He could have told him, he could have not. I don't really remember, but everything else seemed to more or less go according to plan. I don't remember him cooking the sausage up either, or the tea, or doing any of that. I just remember him pulling the cake out, Dudley eating the cake, and then Hagrid turning Dudley into like a part of the pig with the tail. I don't remember that whole fight scene thing that they had in there in the movie. But anyway, that's really it. I mean, that's all for chapter 4. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys happen to like the video, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification, turn on all notifications so you guys never miss a future upload or video. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!